So how you see now, obviously the time that we are this recording right now, there's a few syndicators a little bit in trouble or, not necessarily. So have SEC already got in, after the deal fall apart, probably some pissed off investors. Is
Oh, for sure.
SEC now start getting more
Yeah.
tighter
I don't
or
know if they'll get
more?
tight about what will happen, but it's most likely state regulators that'll get more involved. The SEC is the federal government, the federal agency, and they're looking for bigger fish. People who are
So
doing
they're not
Ponzi
going
schemes.
back and be like, oh, let's investigate how this was formed and stuff like that
Well,
because the deal fall apart, for
yeah,
example.
just because the deal fell apart. Now, what usually has to happen is obviously you're going to need some disgruntled investors, which there are a lot because a lot of investors have lost all their money. So there's two routes for an investor when they lose all their money. They can go hire an attorney and basically bring a lawsuit, a private lawsuit for the recovery of that, or they can pick up the phone and call the SEC and complain to the SEC, or pick up the phone and call.
And they'll answer.
And so then it depends on, does the SEC do anything? Again, most of the time the SEC, they've just got bigger fish to fry. And so usually it's your state regulator that is a little bit more interested in stuff. So if you live in, we're here in Texas, obviously. So if I have an issue and I live in Texas, I would call the Texas Department of Corporations and make a complaint, and they'll most likely open up an audit and they'll do a deep dive. And it really does depend, because I have been on the receiving ends of some of these letters. It really depends on whether you did, do it properly in terms of using an attorney, because in my experience, the regulator will send you a letter and say, hey, there's been an issue, send me all the documents and all this stuff. And I literally will respond by showing them the 150 to 200 page document that we prepared for the client, along with all the signature pages, with the business plan and all the documents.
Yeah, it sounds like
they
a-
can
sounds like a
clearly
book.
see that they at least try to do it properly. They didn't try it, because other people, when they ask for these documents, they don't have anything. It's like, oh, here's my 2-page business plan or whatever, and that's all they have. And that's where they really get excited, because they know they haven't done anything. So when you send them 200 pages of legal docs from a reputable attorney, most of the time they're going to try and find some low-hanging fruit. I'm not saying that that's it automatic, but at least in the past, that's what's happened to us. We've responded and nothing's happened. But that's what happens. It's when investors complain, and a lot of it's just making its way through the process. So right now, people have gone into foreclosure. A lot of properties have been lost. A lot of investors have been hurt, and a lot of them are pissed off. The question now is, are they calling the regulators?
Yeah.
Are they calling lawyers? What's going on? And then the next step, you'll probably see some enforcement action.
Yeah, but I'm sure it's kind of covered as well for the PPMs, right? Because from my experience, I have some people that invest for the first time in those private placements, right? And it's just like they read the PPM document, it's like, oh my God. But it's kind of like, if you go to eye surgery too, there's like, you could die from this. This is a very vague decision. You don't need LASIK or whatever. You might lose your vision.
I love that you brought that up, because I bring this analogy all the time. I actually use my teeth, because I have terrible teeth. I've gone and had oral surgery like at least a dozen times. And every time I go in, even though they put me under for 3 minutes or 2.5 minutes, they give you that medical consent form, right? It's like, here are all the things that could go wrong when we take out your wisdom teeth. You could get an infection, you can get some bleeding, you could die from this thing. And then you sign it, you review it, you sign it, the doctor signs it, and boom, you do the surgery. It's the same thing with the PPM. You put all the ways your deal can go wrong, all the scary scenarios, and as long as they go in it, understanding what the risks are, and they sign it. So when you're doing a syndication, there's really two different pieces to it. One is the actual selling of the security, which happens at the point of sale. Did you give the investor all the proper disclosures? And then once you actually acquire the asset, then it's an operation. Now you're an operator, and you have a fiduciary responsibility, a fiduciary duty to your investors. You have to act as a reasonable, prudent syndicator would under the circumstances. So I think a lot of the times when people lose the property to foreclosure, whatever, it isn't necessarily going to be an issue with a violation of securities laws. It's just going to be a violation that you just didn't do a very good job.
Right.
Like if you had a competent, whatever the standard is for the syndicators, this is where that was, and you fell below that standard because you didn't get a rate cap, for example, or you waited too long to do something. That's more of a private action. So remember, the securities laws would be something where you failed to disclose something in your documentation, which is a little bit difficult, because we put everything in there. So it's very difficult to come up with a scenario where there's not some kind of language, even if it's boilerplate, where it said, yeah, we told you that this could happen, that interest rates could go up, and we'd have a hard time covering our debt service.
And then the same thing, we have the investors that are going to really just look into details, and some of them just like signing, don't even know what they're
100%.
signing. And that was one of the facts that there was a lot of those friends and family that really see what we're doing. It's like, hey, I want to invest to it, and I have no idea. So we created this course just to educate us. Like, this is where you get into it.
Yeah.
Right? Because I feel they go a little bit if not us, thank God all of our deals are performing. But I have all the friends, even investors, they invested passively, it's not doing so well. But it goes one of those things, right? What did go wrong? Is that because the deal didn't perform? Is because you didn't manage correctly?
Yeah, and that's one of the things I'm actually calling around because I know what people were doing, for example, back in 2020 in terms of getting rate caps, right? It's like but some people got rate. The question I have is, was that enough rate cap in terms of 2 basis point over the loan? Was that enough? And then they got 2 or 3 year loans. Was that enough? So I'm calling the folks that I have a lot of respect for and say, look, looking back, obviously hindsight's 2020. Would somebody that did that, would you call that reasonable? Was that unreasonable? And if the standard is, look, that's the standard. You usually got a 2 percentage point rate cap, and that's what you got. Then you haven't done anything wrong, right? So you got to remember there's a standard of care that you have, and in order for you to be liable for something, you have to fall below that standard of care. And just because you lost money doesn't, by definition, mean, which is, by the way, one of my big things about securities laws is that if you don't follow the securities laws, it is possible to lose money for investors, no fault of your own. Like there's whatever happened. Like maybe even 08 could be a good example. You didn't do anything wrong. But because you didn't have your security stuff handled, they're going to get you on that, right? It's almost like the Al Capone thing where, they couldn't get him on whatever murder charges, so they get him on a thing. Or my license plate. I always tell the story of my license plate. When I bought my Mercedes, it didn't have a front license plate. I never get pulled over for not having a front license. In California, you're supposed to have a front license plate. I never get pulled over for the front license plate. But if I get a parking ticket, they're going to tack that on for not having the thing. Tinted windows is another one. Like they're not going to pull me over because I have tinted windows. But if they pull me over for a ticket, they're going to say, "Hey, oh, by the way, you don't have the tinted window. You have tinted windows."
I hate front license plates, dude.
I hate them too.
I yank them all of my cars. I would not move to California just because of that. I'm just kidding. I just hate them.